In our final segment on George Lindsay, looking again at Table 1 from his 1963 paper, it can't be overstated how important this is to the history of sabermetrics. Not only because of the value-added approach to understanding offense and the real start of research into linear weights as a way to measure offensive performance and other parts of the game, because the value-added approach has been implemented in pitching evaluation, fielding evaluation, across the board. This approach was the one that's been successful in sabermetrics research. But beyond that, what Lindsay does is look at situations. So not just this idea of value-added performance measures, but looking at a situation to see if it actually works in baseball. Now, what he has here is expected runs in different base-out situations and the probability of scoring runs in these different base-out situations. He also has win probability that we described in an earlier video. So the combination of win probability, the combination of run probabilities, and expected runs in different base-out situations is what Lindsay establishes. These are average things, and I can't emphasize that enough. These are average situations, obviously modified by personnel in any given situation analysis. But who's pitching, who's batting, who's coming up next. So here's one situation he looked at, the intentional walk. And he analyzed the intentional walk when it's used in baseball. And he finds that it doesn't increase the probability of the defensive team actually winning the game, except in one very specific situation. If that defensive team is winning by 1 run and they've allowed runners on second and third and there's only 1 out, that's a situation where there's a slight advantage to giving an intentional walk to the batter. Again, this is average, and this is obviously dependent on the batting order, who's pitching, and who's coming up next in the batting order. Another situation Lindsay addresses is what to do when there's a man on first. This is routine in baseball, is that you play for the double play. When there's a runner on first, the shortstop infielders play for the double play. The shortstop and second baseman pinch in towards second, looking to run the double play. But the other question, which he started in the 1959 paper, was, do you play the infield in if there's a runner on third base, as opposed to moving the second baseman shortstop back to double play depth in the hope that you get a double play. So his conclusion, based on his situational analysis, looking at this table and win probabilities, is always play for the double play with a runner on first, except when there's a runner on third that would tie the game or take the lead. And then you play to keep that runner from scoring. You play the infield in at that point. So in the situation where there's a tie game or that runner at third will actually take the lead for the other team, then you play in. Otherwise, you always go for the double play. That's what Lindsay's conclusion was. He also analyzes the sacrifice bunt, the sacrifice hit. And it doesn't seem to work hardly ever, except if there's a runner on third and you have the right personnel to implement this risky play. In other words, maybe you have a speedy runner on third and you've got a batter who's actually quite skilled at bunting. If that's the situation, if you have the personnel that can accomplish the squeeze play with the runner on third, it's actually the time to try to do a sacrifice hit, or a sacrifice bunt. Finally, the last situation that Lindsay analyzes in the 1963 paper is stolen bases. And his conclusion is it very much depends on the individual and their stolen base success rate. Also, be careful about the pitcher and the catcher and their ability to control the running game. If they're very strong at controlling the running game, then maybe that's not the time to do a stolen base. If they're weak at controlling the running game, maybe that's a time to try it. Basically, look at your personnel. It seems to matter. And again, when the game is close, it's even worth more to try to attempt that stolen base, to try to get to second base and getting in scoring position. If a one run is very much needed to tie or to take the lead, that's an extra incentive to try that stolen base because it actually helps your win probability. These are the situations that Lindsay looks at in the 1963 paper. And again, this is at the forefront of sabermetric thinking since then. A lot of sabermetric analyses have supported these notions about the intentional walk, about when to bunt and how it's useful in certain situations, and when to try a stolen base. So these have stood the test of time in a way, these recommendations by Lindsay over 50 years ago. The last slide I want to show you is this one here. These are URLs, shortened URLs that you can type in yourself to get these different papers. The 3 links under baseball papers are the 3 important papers written by George Lindsay himself. At the top is his well-written obituary from the Toronto Globe and Mail newspaper. It's a great read to understand the importance of this man's life and his contributions to many different fields, baseball included. Finally, Alan Schwartz does a very nice article titled Darwin of the Diamond, and it's all about George Lindsay and his career and his work in baseball. Highly recommended that you follow these links and learn more about George Lindsay, one of the great sabermetricians.